Welcome to Fun with Annuities with your host, me, Stan the Annuity Man, America's annuity agent. Can annuities be fun? Can contractual guarantees be fun? Absolutely they can. Find out the brutal facts about annuities with no sales pitches or high-pressure nonsense. Just the brutal and factual annuity truth, which is all you need to hear. Let's have some fun with annuities, and let's have that fun start right now. Welcome to Fun with Annuities. I'm your host, Stan, the Annuity Man, America's annuity agent. And as you know, licensed in all 50 states. I encourage you to go to my site, run your own quotes, get my books. I'll send them to you for free. You can schedule a call with me as well. But this podcast, Fun with Annuities, we are really enjoying bringing on experts in their field to educate you. Because, in our world, you buy an annuity for what it will do, not what it might do. Those are the contractual guarantees, and there's no urgency to do that. The urgency is to understand what you're buying. Our guest today, his name is Steve Parrish. He's got so many letters and things behind his name. I don't even know where to start. But the bottom line, he is a lawyer. He is an adjunct professor for the American College, which is in our world where people go to learn to do the right thing from the standpoint of advice, giving advice from a retirement standpoint. He also writes for a myriad of places. One of those is Forbes. You've probably seen him. If not, when you see the next time you see a Forbes article come by Steve Parrish, make sure to read it. So with that being said in the introduction, Steve, welcome to Fun with Annuities.
Thank you, Stan. It's nice to be here.
Well, excellent. Let's jump in. I read an article a long time ago that you had these 3 reasons why you feel people don't understand annuities. And there's a lot of reasons, because I don't think the annuity industry does a very good job of educating the public. That's kind of where I step in and where I hang my hat as an edutainer. What are those 3 things? And if there are more, go into the more things that are kind of confusing the people when they talk about annuities.
I think that's a good place to start because really annuities are a form of insurance, right? It's just insurance for the longevity versus dying too soon. And everybody understands the concept of insurance, but they don't want to pay for it, or at least they don't think they want to. So they get into things like saying, well, why would I buy an annuity? Because if I die, 2 days after I buy that, I don't get my money back. So part of it is they don't understand the whole concept of annuities not being an investment, but really being a form of insurance that makes the investment that much better. The other thing is, and you even commented on it, I suppose traditionally the industry hasn't done a great job of explaining it. It's not the simplest thing in the world, and sometimes people try to baffle them with their BS a little bit.
Right.
Really, the concept is pretty straightforward if you think about it. The bells and whistles are nice, but I think sometimes people lead off with the bells and whistles of I can make this guaranteed income for life and not really explain what annuity is. So I think it's really more a matter of financial literacy, though I hate that term. In other words, knowing more, being a little more educated, then really an annuity is a fairly simple thing. And you realize that the whole idea of I don't want to pay for it is just saying they're not always grasping the idea that some people are going to die before their life expectancy. Some are going to die after their life expectancy. And so really get kind of a mortality premium if you live afterwards. And that's the insurance part is, hey, the technology may come along. I may live to 110, even though I didn't think I was going to make it past 80. This is the advantage of insurance. It's just kind of the flip side of life insurance.
I think the annuity industry, unfortunately, has just not herded the cats, for lack of a better phrase. When you say the word annuity, most people think of lifetime income annuities, and those are the primary types. But there's many that protect the principal and do other things, long-term care, et cetera. But they're all guarantees. They're all transfer risk products. If I was czar for the day in the annuity industry, first of all, it'd be a lot of fun. Second of all, our mantra would be got guarantees, like the got milk ad, because these are guarantees, they're contracts. And the question is, what are you trying to solve for? And I've broken it down to an easy acronym called PIL, Principal Protection, Income for Life, Legacy, and Long-Term Care. and I always ask people, what do you want the money to contractually do, and when do you want those contractual guarantees to start? I really believe it's that simple. However, we let outside people frame the I hate annuities culture, which is somewhat funny to me because every single person, that has Social Security owns a Social Security annuity, the best inflation annuity on the planet. Why do you think that the messaging within the industry is so poor? Because the American college, I mean, you guys are the academics. You're the guys with the, with the tweed jackets and the ascots and smoking the pipe, and you're the guys in the tower that are smart, and we all look to you for your guidance and your insight. But for the consumer, how did things go wrong, and how did the annuity industry earn this bad reputation that we currently have?
I think the main thing is historical. Frankly, annuities, as I said, are really a form of insurance in a very positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets associated with its cousin, life insurance, and people have that conception of, oh, wait a minute, this is something with high commissions, and where somebody's going to, break my arm to do that, and
Right.
don't realize that's all changed. When I used to work on very high-end accounts dealing with life insurance, and I'd be talking to the CPA, and the CPA would give you the same line as you hear with annuities is, oh, we were using corporate-owned life insurance. And say, oh, I don't like life insurance. And I said, okay, we're not going to call it life insurance. We're going to call it Fred. Now, here's what Fred does. And we go through it all. They get a little laugh and say, yeah, actually that works, the tax-free death benefit and all that. Same thing with annuities. I think it's associated with the idea that it's they're going to take all your money,
Right.
which you can do all kinds of things and buy all kinds of things with, and they're just going to give you back a fixed payment. As you said, they see annuity as just this one single fixed payment, and most of it's going to be bled off with commission. So I think it's just historical. That's why I said it's not insurmountable. People just, if they read about it and listen to your podcast, just thinking out loud, it makes a lot more sense. And yes, one other comment is, I'm at an academic institution. I don't get paid by anybody other than the institution. And I'm just telling you, as somebody who works through the numbers and does retirement and financial planning, annuities are a very important part of the equation. And the proof's in the pudding that I own annuities as part of my retirement plan.
Well, and I think that, people, when they say I hate all annuities, I say that's like saying you hate all restaurants, or you hate all trucks, or you hate all shoes. And, I point back to the Social Security or a pension if they're so fortunate to have one. But I think the annuity industry has kind of won the lottery because they're in the way, whether they want to be or not, of the biggest demographic tidal wave of all time, which is 10,000 baby boomers hitting age 65. And regardless of how bad a sales message may be, they want guarantees. And they're going to find the guarantees regardless of interest rates, political environment, et cetera. One of the things that, in doing the research, my team and I were kind of laughing on one of your pound the table everybody has 3 words, and yours is refuse to retire, which I thought was good. And I always tell people that are retirees or thinking about becoming retired or pointing toward that, there's a chapter 2 in your life that falls under your category of refuse to retire. Expound upon what that means to you.
Right. And I think this helps with a lot of people to think of it this way. There is financial retirement, and then there's emotional retirement. So because of my advanced age, you couldn't tell from this picture, I look so young, but I am a person of a certain age who qualifies, or not just qualifies, I'm on Medicare, and I am getting Social Security payments. So financially, I'm retired. I also get a pension plan from my former employer. But obviously, I'm not emotionally retired. I work a full schedule. I travel, well, now that COVID-19 is being controlled, and I write and all these things. So in my mind, I'm like a lot of people that you may run across who almost bristle when they look at me and say, oh, you must be retired. And it's kind of, why do you assume I'm retired? So that's the refuse to retire thing. Is it's nice to have the option. Now, some people really like it, and a lot of research tells us that once people go through the emotional part of actually retiring, once they're retired, most people really enjoy it. Yes, there's the fear of being bored, and they turn out, guess what, you can't golf every day.
Right.
But most people do enjoy it. but a lot of us also enjoy working. And so that's what I mean by refuse to retire. As long as I can do and add value, I'm going to.
And I came up with a phrase recently called life entrepreneur. Chapter 2, you become the entrepreneur of your life, the managing of your company, which is you and your family and your assets and your retirement and your planning and your legacy and your health. And I think, everyone is going to transition hopefully to that life entrepreneur stage, but I just love the refuse to retire. One of the kind of pivoting to a harder topic, one of the articles you wrote recently in Forbes, and when I read it, everybody falls under this situation, and everybody can point to someone that they know. And the title of it, I'm going to read the title, was Getting Ahead of Your Diminished Capacity Worries. And I need you to go into that, because that's just, you're stepping into a realm that we all know that's going to happen to all of us, but we all hesitate to plan for it. So kind of walk us through what you think that means, how we should approach it, the possibility of an income floor using annuities helping with that.
Certainly. That's been an area of interest for me. And to be honest, Dan, partly because, recognizing the age I just said I'm getting at, I have a lot of friends that it's become almost a lab for watching what happens in retirement, because a lot of my friends that are similar ages are now retired. And I'm starting to notice certain aspects of diminished capacity. So it's really thinking about it this way: is first, what is diminished capacity? It's not necessarily a long-term care event. It's not Alzheimer's. That certainly is a form of it, but and it's not just because you can't remember names as easily as you did before. It's somewhere in there where
it's not full-blown dementia, is what you're saying. You're saying it's right. the stage of life where that you got an 8-cylinder engine, but you're hitting on 5 cylinders, right?
Yeah, and some of those cylinders might, for example, be you're perfectly functioning, everything's fine, but you don't like working with your monthly bills. You really don't like to have to make investment choices and that kind of thing. So your capacity financially is diminished, but it doesn't mean you've lost it and you're going into the home. So that's the issue, is how do you address that in advance? Because guess who the last person will be that knows you have diminished capacity?
It's you.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a really good way to put it. And I talked to Jamie Hopkins recently. He says, forget ROI, it's ROS, it's return on sleep. And really what he's saying is, taking care of yourself, chapter 2 of your life, and the diminished capacity prediction, 1 out of 1 of us is going to have it, right?
Right.
And how do you see the annuity space or the industry addressing that? And do you think that as an industry, we might be a little proactive, even though it steps on a few emotional toes?
Well, I think that's a very strong point, because annuities are really, it's a do-it-yourself defined benefit plan. If you think about annuities, I sometimes call it a DIY-DB, meaning my dad, had his government pension, and he didn't have to think about it. So retirement was fine from him. He got his check.
Right.
Most of us, are looking at 401ks, and we're dealing with sequence of return, and we're dealing with all these issues. And so what you're doing, and that's why I want to bring diminished capacity into it, is as you retire, maybe you even don't have diminished capacity. You just don't want to deal with it anymore. The fact is, if you know that you have, number one, a stream of income that's predictable, and number two, that it will continue for the whole of life, because you don't know how long you're going to live. So it picks up the tail end, if you will, of longevity. That brings huge peace of mind and security. So where I'm going with annuities as part of that solution is that it addresses those two questions. And when you're just not wanting to deal with finances, that's one thing. When you actually have diminished capacity, then it becomes extremely powerful, because one, you're getting the income and you don't have to worry about it. And two, it can very much help with elder abuse. So if you're sitting on $1 million of a 401k plan and taking 4% of it every year, that can expose you to elder abuse if you're starting to lose it and don't know it. If instead you've used a reverse mortgage or annuities or those kind of things that lock in a stream of payment, it's harder for that culprit, which might be your kids, to really raid the kitty, because you're getting a periodic payment, much as our grandparents got defined benefit plan payments.
Well, and I think it's important to point out, a lot of people out there think, well, the evil annuity company is going to keep the money, and when I die, the money's going to go poof. That's one of about 40 ways to structure it contractually. And most of the ones, the lifetime income streams that we, structure for people in all 50 states, the annuity company's on the hook to pay. But if your Learjet hits the mountain and you die, then 100% of any unused money goes to your beneficiary. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions out there. As you were speaking, I was thinking about it. We always think about legacy products being life insurance, and it really, life insurance is the best legacy product on the planet. It's the best return on investment you'll never see because you're dead, but it transfers tax-free, probate-free lump sum. But in a diminished capacity planning scenario, lifetime income annuities with a cash refund that all the money goes to the family or the trust if you die, to me, that's a really good legacy product as well. Would you agree?
I'd agree, and I'd even add to that the legacy doesn't have to necessarily be a lump sum. So just as a different example of that, I had some life insurance that had over 6 figures of cash value in it. And as we moved in a phase of life, didn't need that. We had some other insurance. As you know, there's a thing called a 1035 exchange that allows you to exchange it, the cash value, tax-free, to an annuity.
And by the way, for the people out there, 1035 is a reference to the IRS code. If you're so bored, you can pull up section 1035 and read it, where it's a non-taxable event, does not trigger any taxes. And I do agree with you, Steve, that you can set up what's called installment refund, which I always joke with my 2 daughters that I don't want them getting the cash refund because they'll just show up at the funeral in a Lamborghini. I want them making payments on the Lamborghini. They're going to show up in it anyway. So, but yeah, you can structure the death benefit of an annuity. It's customizable. You could have a cash refund. You could have installment refund. Installment refund, in essence, is a period certain to a life expectancy. You can do whatever you want. The annuity companies are just going to bid on it because this is a commodity product. I apologize for interrupting, but go ahead.
Well, and I'll just add the third point. So, you could do the lump sum, as we started with, and then you said you can do installment.
Sure.
I'll put you in the mindset of a person my age, and what we looked at, because I've been married for 42 years, we looked and said that life insurance was on my life. If I, who's the main breadwinner, die, you have this money. But we're at that phase where it's not as big an issue, but you still now want an income. We have Social Security and other things. So what we did is actually have that annuity pay over our joint life.
Nice.
And so to me, that's a death benefit in the sense that we don't know which one of us will go first, but my wife will take comfort in knowing that if I'm the first one to go, and it's always the other one that's going to go first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just a rule of thumb. She will have the death benefit, but the death benefit is an income stream. And a retiree thinks of income streams more than lump sum. So that's where I was going with that idea.
And what people need to understand about joint life income stream, what Steve was just explaining, is that income stream continues uninterrupted and unchanged for the life of the spouse or partner, which I think is a lot of the people that, getting back to the diminished capacity category and the topic, a lot of those A personality gentlemen that call me and set up the joint lifetime income, they're taking care of their wives, and that's admirable. But I find myself pivoting more and more, speaking to people about, I know you're sharp as a tack now, Fred, or whoever the guy's name is or lady's name is, Francine. But have you thought about when you're not hitting it on all cylinders and what you need to do to put something in place so that your heirs don't have to deal with that from a durable power of attorney standpoint? I know you're a lawyer and you specialize in these type of things. Do you see that being more prevalent? I know that you teach that within your courses at the American College, but do you see that being more prevalent as we get older?
That's certifiable. I mean, in other words, there's plenty of actual hard data to talk about age is one of the key determinants in diminished capacity. I mean, certainly there are other morbidity issues that can get you, but unquestionably, if you say what's the biggest one, we all know that as you get older, this sounds a little scary, but your capacity probably starts slowing down around age 50. That doesn't mean that we've all lost it after 50, but that's
I can vouch
reality.
for that. I can vouch for that, Steve. It's starting to slip.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I mean, and it's something that as an estate planning expert like you are, and by the way, you know, who you're listening to is Steve Parrish. He's got cowboy boots older than most of you out there. That's even looked at investments. He's been doing this for over 4 decades. We're going to have a specific page set up for him on my site at theannuityman.com, so you can re-listen to this. And if you want to shoot him an email, you can. But he is one of the gurus in our space, and a thought leader in our space when it comes to retirement life insurance annuities. Understand that life insurance companies issue annuities. One of the other things I wanted to kind of pivot to is what you have done a lot of work on, which is called phased retirement. Can you kind of dig into that so the listeners and viewers can understand what phased retirement is and how that applies to them and what they might need to do?
I'd love to, because that's just something I'm experiencing and feeling good about it. And I'll start with a personal example that my father got his law degree after World War II, became an FBI agent. And guess what? The FBI doesn't want you working till you're 70. And so his encore career, sometimes that's a term used, was to be a professor in the last, 10 years. My brother was a business executive. After doing one too many mergers and acquisitions, in his last phase, he became a professor. And guess what? I was a financial advisor and worked, was an executive at an insurance company. This is my last phase. So that would be an example of a family that does phased retirement. But what I'm getting at for most people is that the market has changed. You're going to live longer on average, actuarially, and jobs generally have become less manual. There's not as many ditch diggers. And so that means you're going to live longer, and the kind of job you're involved in, you may be able to do longer. So people are looking and going, either because they want to work more or because they need to work more, they'd like to have some options. The phased retirement, and there's certainly a lot of data suggesting this is where people are going. The golden watch concept of, you work your 40 years, you get your golden watch and you're done, really doesn't show up that much in data. Certainly people do it. So look at it this way. You can't be a ditch digger that works to 70, realistically.
Right.
But you could be a customer service rep that could work to 70 if you need to or if you want to.
Sure.
And maybe you don't want to commute to Manhattan until you're 70, but would be fine on working from your office at home until 70. That's what I do. I work from home. So phased retirement is, it can either be with the employer you have, because a lot of employers are doing this, and COVID-19 certainly made it happen where you had to work from home. Whoever knew what Zoom was, we thought that meant a fast car.
No clue. I had no clue what that was, but it's amazing what's changed. And hold that thought for a second. I was just thinking as you talk, my parents were both, they retired as school teachers in the state of North Carolina, and their encore, I guess, job after that is they were volunteer. Well, they were paid. I call them volunteer. They get paid a lot at the Charlotte Coliseum, and they would go to the Hornets games, and they were ushers, and they'd see all the concerts. So they saw every game and every concert that went through Charlotte. That was their encore job after the real job. So when you said that, I'm like, yeah, my parents kind of did that, which was cool. Yeah. They would tell me about the Grateful Dead concert or the AC/DC concert they just saw, and I'm like, that's incredible. So keep going with the phased retirement. This is interesting.
Yeah, it's where things are going, whether we like it or not. And I think we should like it because employers are accommodating that kind of thing. I don't have to be, the college is actually in Philadelphia, and I'm sitting here in St. Augustine. So you can do that kind of thing. Now, the reason I'm interested in that from a financial standpoint is that means you're also phasing your finances somewhat. So I would state that Social Security is almost always something you want to delay taking as long as you can, ideally at age 70. Well, if you have that kind of thing but you want to retire before that, that's where I was thinking about things like annuities, because they can be bridge assets. They can kind of carry you over so that you can leave that, let's say it's a 6-figure job, and now what you're going to be doing is working part-time, or some of it's volunteer, so you're not making as much. Your cash flow has slowed down, but you don't want to start taking Social Security. So my interest in phased retirement in the financial side is, what financial assets can we do to help you bridge and to provide some of that cash flow to accommodate this change in your life?
Interesting. I think that as people get older, and the funny thing about COVID, not funny, it's been tragic, but I think the interesting thing about COVID is I believe that it will actually increase our life expectancy, because it's been a wake-up call from a health standpoint for all of us to get a little bit more healthy, even though the government doesn't want to say that. I guess that's not politically correct for them to say, hey, let's get in shape, let's lose some weight. But I think we all are saying, wait a minute, life is fragile. And I do think life expectancies after we come out of this COVID thing will be longer, because the one great thing about this country is that we learn and we adapt and we try not to get hit with the same type of problem, 2 times in a row. And I do think that there is so much proactivity on the biotech side and the pharmaceutical side that's just a great part about this country. Do you agree with that? Do you think we'll come out of this and maybe life expectancy might increase?
I think that's a given, unless we have something, a black swan event, as they call it, again,
Right.
like this. But what's going on is, really, last year was interesting. If you think about this, is mortality increased, basically meaning people were dying 1 year sooner from a pure mortality standpoint last year. And yet the IRS has new tables kicking in January 1 of this next year, where they assume your life expectancy is 2 years longer than it has been in the past. Meaning that you need these, because the IRS basically says, if you have IRAs, once you hit 72, we're going to make you take some of those out. But you have to use these mortality tables. And actually, they are assuming that people my age are going to live 2 years longer than in the past. So where I'm going with this, Stan, is, yes, there was a hit to mortality, but it was very much in the elderly market. Put away the TVs and all that. It was basically in kind of that 80-plus market.
It was.
Otherwise, mortality really, in macro, wasn't that much. And technology continues to improve. And as you point out, I think people maybe are getting better about their personal habits, especially when people retire. They tend to realize their new job is to take care of themselves.
No, I agree. It kind of feeds into what I was doing a podcast with Tom Hegna the other day, and he's pounding the table literally and saying, Stan, at this time, the mortality credits are a bargain. He just thinks that the mortality credits right now, you should take advantage of it. Because just remember, if the prediction of the annuity company is that you're going to live longer, that means there are going to be more payments, which means the payments will be lower. That's the simplistic explanation of what Tom was pounding the table on mortality credits. And it really kind of leads into what you were saying, which is, yes, there was a blip in the screen, and not to be morbid, but a lot of those people were very close to passing away at the age 8 in the 88 range. And they just did with COVID. Unfortunately, it was tragic. And I had 3 friends my age die tragically too. So it happened all over. But the point is, I do think that, people always ask me, is it the right time to buy annuities? And they're always focused on the interest rate part of it, which is a secondary pricing mechanism for life expectancy. I think between you and what Tom Hegna, and I've done some others with Wade and Jamie, they're all saying, hey, I think it's actually a good time. That's not a sales pitch. That's just a factual and mathematical reality of what's happened. And I just find it interesting. Once again, Steve, if me and you were running the annuity industry, the ads would already be running. Take advantage of today's mortality credits. Lock in your lifetime income right now.
Yeah, but people don't understand, and I get why, because it can be complicated, but risk pooling. There is no way you as an individual
Yes.
can plan for your average age. The fact is, if your life expectancy is 84, you might live to 94. And what
Sure.
are you going to do then? Are you going to eat cat food and live in your car? So you have to plan for longer mortality than the life expectancy tables say that. The insurance company doesn't have the same problem. They can price their products for average mortality. And so what you're
Hmm.
doing is you're essentially letting them have the problem of who dies first rather than you having it. And so that's that mortality, the premium that Jamie or Wade or talk about. That's what we're getting. You can't personally do that. You have to kind of buy your way into that with the insurance company. And that's,
Hmm.
again, why people like me go out and buy annuities. It just makes sense because I don't want to have to worry about it. I got other things to do.
You said the word plan in there, and it jumped out in my head about kind of the current tax law. It's kind of in flux. You wrote an article recently that jumped out because I remember when you said that, I'm like, there was an article you did recently on that about how to plan. How do you plan right now when Washington D.C. is as dysfunctional, and that's saying a lot,
Yeah.
as we've ever seen it. And whether they're dysfunctional or not, there's 10,000 people turning 65 every day. They've got to do something. They got to plan. All right, Steve Parrish, ball's in your court. What do we do?
Well, and I tend to eat my own words sometimes in the last few weeks because we're all going through this. And
Hmm.
I just saw a couple hours ago the latest version has come out. One thing I've said that might help, just as a way of thinking about it,
Hmm.
is you know how a traffic light works. So you
Hmm.
have green, yellow, and the red in my mind is the things that Congress people come up with that you know is not going to pass. So maybe on the more liberal side, it could be this big wealth tax. On the more conservative side, they've talked about getting rid of the estate tax.
Right.
Neither one of those are likely to happen. Don't build that into your planning. I mean, never say never, but it's not going to happen.
Be rational.
Be rational.
Yeah.
Certainly just wait and find out what happens. Now, the green light means people have forgotten that there is a thing called the Secure Act that was passed
Hmm.
back at just before COVID hit, and most people haven't changed their plans to deal with that. For example, now you don't have to take required minimum distributions until 72. You used to have to take it at 70 and a half. Once you pass on, and if you have inherited annuities, the rules change quite a bit.
Hmm.
What I'm getting at is that's green light. That is tax law. And let's worry about the existing stuff like that before we worry
Sure.
about what they're doing in Disneyland East, otherwise known as DC. And I guess where you're probably wondering, okay, what's the yellow light? That's the caution one. But you know what I am figuring out, and this is someone who's a tax attorney in many ways.
Hmm.
A lot of those really only deal with very affluent to wealthy people.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of the things being talked about, we've been rushing around madly, and most of us have realized we probably were right to just hold because they keep changing the rules. So how do you plan for it? When you really scrub all that away, a lot of that is noise. You plan for it the way you would have before Congress got at it or after. A lot of the rules aren't going to change. I mean, the taxation of annuities, I don't think is going to change. There's nothing out there to suggest it. So long way of saying you go with the green stuff, keep an eye out for the yellow, but for most consumers, a lot of that is for the ultra high net worth and high net worth individual.
And I think that's a great way to look at it, which is the green is what we need to plan for right now.
Yeah.
The yellow is something that you can rationally see happening. Red stuff, like another red one that I think is red, hope it's red, is I've read some things about our friends in DC messing around with the Roth IRA.
Mm-hmm.
And I have predicted that ever since they walked out of the building and passed the Roth IRA. I'm like, they're trying to figure out how to tax it because, and hopefully that is a red one, but that might be a yellow one for now, just to see what they're going to do. But I do think that people need to get up to speed, and we can get you up to speed if needed on the Secure Act and all of the stuff that's green that's going to be there, so that you can make those plans. But I certainly wouldn't hesitate or put off a plan based upon some newscast or
Yeah.
something you read, because nobody really knows, especially in the climate that we're in.
Yeah, the things that are at the planning level that we deal with are, if you're going to sell a business, maybe you sell it now so you keep your capital gains down, or some very sophisticated trust planning with life insurance. But in the world that a lot of what you deal with, annuities and Roths and all that, I don't think there's anything to worry about. They're talking about putting a maximum on Roth. I wish I had the kind of money they're talking about. These are very large amounts before you have to worry about it. So,
well, and what triggered the whole Roth thing is the hedge fund guy that started with the Roth,
Peter
and
Thiel.
he put his 5,000. Now it's worth $5 billion.
Yeah.
And that made everybody mad.
Yeah.
And he played by the rules. Now he had some insight and some sweetheart deals from the standpoint of IPOs and things like that. We can go into that later, but that's what's triggered all this, is one guy now that has a $5 billion with a B dollar Roth IRA that he can now take out tax-free. And that's driving some DC politicians absolutely batty, which I think is kind of funny. Steve, some of the courses that you teach at the American College, are just fantastic. I wish that in the future those you could do maybe a Hillsdale College model, or Hillsdale College teaches a course to their students on the Constitution, but they open it up to the public. I'm not some right winger. I'm not a left winger. I'm a capitalist, but I think that's a good idea. But in looking at your courses, one of them that kind of jumped out was just managing the income plan. And I know that you're approaching it in your course content to the advisor and the agent and the RIA and the CFP and those people and the CMAs. For the consumer, managing the retirement plan means what to you?
That's a great way of looking at it, because we only have so much bandwidth and interest. And really, first of all, think that retirement is not just an event. The people think, well, I take care of Medicare, I take care of Social Security, and everything else continues the same. Not really. Especially when you truly retire, you're going to have time in your hand. You're going to be with your spouse in a way you've never been before, all those kind of things. So you have to kind of think of it as truly a change in life. So part of it is the behavioral or emotional part, not the money.
Right.
As far as when the events you think about for money, I would just bring up three key things. One is your Social Security decision is absolutely key, even for the affluent. Because of the way it's structured, you can take it between 62 and 70, and it makes a huge amount of difference.
It does.
For the rest of your life. Medicare is incredibly complex. I apologize. I don't know why I didn't come up with the law. It's nice to have. But you see all the things going on TV because we're in open enrollment.
Right.
You really need to make that decision very thoughtfully, and you got to do it at 65. You can't put it off. So those are the two big ones. But the third one that people are still slow to think about is what I mentioned before. Our parents or our grandparents had defined benefit pension plans. So they had a company provided, knowing they knew they were going to get some money that would take care of a lot of it. Now they have 401ks, so suddenly you have to decide what to do with it. Also, even if you had other savings, my parents would have had savings bonds and passbook accounts, they called it back then, basically bank and savings bonds. Well, now we have mutual funds and we have EFTs and all these different things. So the third stool of that, if you take Medicare, Social Security, is what do you do with your 401k, the qualified side, and what do you do with your other savings, the non-qualified side, because no one else is going to do it for you. That's something people like you and I have to deal with that our parents or grandparents did not deal with.
And the word that's used a lot of times, because the 401k side is the building up of assets, is accumulation. And then I think falsely we use the word decumulation, which just sounds like decomposing. I think we need to change that to transitioning to income, transitioning to a pension, because I think the latest stat that I read is I think it's less than 9% of all private companies offer a defined benefit type pension plan, which means that everyone else, if you're not working for the government or a very good labor union, has to figure out how to create a lifetime income stream. And this is where the annuity industry by default are going to look like heroes. They have the only product type that will provide a lifetime income stream. So they're sitting right in front of it, of the demographic tidal wave. What makes me frustrated, Steve, is that most carriers are pushing the growth story instead of the income story. Now, I understand it's a revenue issue from the standpoint of the growth products create more commission and revenue and all this stuff, which could easily be solved if we just put all annuities at the same commission level, which I know is never going to happen. But I can dream, Steve. I can dream about six-pack abs. I can dream about that. I can dream about the annuity industry telling people about lifetime income. But that's managing your plan, I think, does come down to those three things that you mentioned. Since that was so good, I wrote down another one of your courses is the sources of retirement income. And I think it would be beneficial to the listeners and viewers for you to kind of look at it from a consumer standpoint and remind people of those sources. Some of them are pretty glaring, but you need to, as you're building your income floor, as I tell people, and that's the amount of money that's hitting your bank account every single month, regardless of who's in office, what contributes to that income floor?
Yeah, I'm glad you ask it that way because, and it sounds like you probably think the same way I do. I don't like it when you say, what's your number at retirement?
No.
What's that mean? You can't spend $1 million. Well, yeah, you could spend $1 million, but you'd be sorry you did. It's really what income you're getting. So you're looking at your sources of it, and your sources are either going to basically come from the government, like Social Security, or they're going to come from income that you have from an annuity or from your employer if you do have defined benefit, or it's going to come from capital, which means your investments. Here's I think, a handy way of thinking about it. And when I say this to consumers, they kind of go, I hadn't looked at it this way. When you're accumulating your assets, really what is your target is your return on the money. So if you made 8% in the market this year, great. Sure. What's your risk? Well, we can get fancy and talk about standard deviation and all that, but basically the risk is volatility or default, that kind of stuff. Not so once you retire. Once you actually retire, what's your return is not what you got in your investment. Your return is what you're paying yourself each month, because you're retired. Your human capital is gone. You're not out there and you're not really investing. I like accumulating, but whatever you want to call it.
You said human capital. That's are they copying you, Steve? Because all I hear now is human infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think someone absconded your saying. So human capital. What's human capital again?
The ability to work. So
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that with a lot of people say, I'm going to retire for a few years and see how it goes, but their licenses expired, or they're staying up in the industry stopped and their contacts went away. Their human capital expires.
Right.
So if that goes away, then you really have to replace it somewhere. And just to finish the thought I had on that is, think about it. When you retire, your return is whatever you pay yourself. What's the risk in retirement? The risk is essentially that you run out of money before you run out of oxygen.
Right.
Do you really care if you have zero? I mean, unless you want to leave a legacy, but you can take care of that with other things like life insurance, So you have to look at it different, and it's a long way of answering your question about sources of income. Really, in retirement, that's your bogey, is income. So that can come from those things I said, but in many cases, the tricky part is taking the part of it that's capital, investments, and all that, and figuring out the magical way to turn that into retirement income. And obviously, that's why we're talking about annuities and things, because that's the one that tells you will not run out of money before you run out of oxygen, because it's going to pay out during your lifetime.
As long as you're breathing, and I always tell people, you need to figure out how much risk you want to transfer and how much risk you want to shoulder. And annuities aren't for everybody. I have the 85-year-old that says, I'm fine in the markets. Go for it. Knock yourself out. If you don't need to transfer risk, fine. And then I might have the 47-year-old that goes, I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they need to transfer risk. Kind of to close out, because I think that, yeah, this has been fascinating for me, because just to be able to sit down with someone like you that's had so much experience in the field, and your fingers on the pulse of things that are new, which is also unique, that you bring all this experience to the table. But yet when you work for the American College, you're with everyone else who's the thought leader,
Mhm.
which is exceptional. Um, the retirement income process, and you teach a course called Retirement Income Process Strategies and Solutions. And I apologize for keep going back to your courses, but once again, these are the type of courses that I think would be so beneficial for the consumer, which is the reason I do the podcast, because I bring you on to talk about it. What's the process? What's the strategies and solutions that you haven't already covered that maybe be a nugget of wisdom for the consumer out there that's either pre-retired, retired, post-retired, or just trying to be better at retirement?
That's a fair question. So without going through the 10 steps that we teach
Sure.
in doing the process, you think about, first of all, what are you going to need in retirement? And it's not necessarily going to be 100% of what you had pre-retirement. In most cases, it's going to be somewhat less, but just because somebody on the internet said it was 80% of what you made pre-retirement isn't necessarily correct. You have to think about, what expenses am I going to have? So first of all, what amount of income? The other part of that is it something that you want to tilt heavily towards the early years of retirement? You've probably heard that term, go-go years versus the slow-go years versus the no-go years.
Go, slow go, no go.
No-go.
I
And
love
if you think about it, most people are
it.
that way. You retire, and now as COVID's being contained, you can get in that plane and go take your grandkids to Disneyland or make that European trip you never got around to. You
Mm-hmm.
may actually end up spending more at the early part of retirement. Then you're going to slow down and not necessarily go to restaurants and as much and that kind of thing. And then the no-go years are in frailty.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is a kind of, and you don't have to be an actuary to do it, but kind of lay out what you think that needed cash flow is going to be. That's part of the process. Part of it is to picture, to really envision what you're going to do in retirement. In fact, I should have put that first. How do you define retirement?
Right.
There are people like me that say, I'm going to work until, you're going to have to take me out in a gurney. But the fact is, you have to kind of think through, what is it going to be like and what are my risks? So
Mm-hmm.
in my Forbes column, I always talk about, I deal with risk in retirement, because people always talk about retirement income,
Sure.
but that's fine. But what happens if you have long-term care issue or your spouse dies? That has both financial and emotional issues. So you identify your risks. Then you start thinking about what we already talked about, sources of income, because I can't emphasize it enough. Big issues like when you take Social Security, how you tap your home equity, like reverse mortgages, those kind of concepts, and how you structure your taxes make a huge amount of difference. We haven't even mentioned that, but annuities have, at least non-qualified annuities, have the advantage of spreading out your taxation.
Mm-hmm.
So you work through those kind of things, and then you start figuring out, how am I going to deal with it once I retire? Because we talked about diminished capacity. Have I taken care of making sure I have a power of attorney? Do I have a will? All those kind of things, so that when the date comes, you feel like you have a plan. Don't let anybody fool you that you have to spend $1 billion to do this. But you do need to go through that, because you've never retired before. So you have to envision what that is and think through the process. And it's more complicated than it was for past generations, again, because the government or your employer is not just making it easy for you.
That's well put. And I do encourage everybody that, and it's hard to tell people this, but when people get to phase 2 of their life, chapter 2, slow go, slow go, or no go, you have to enjoy yourself. You've worked hard out there. You've checked the boxes. You've scrimped. You've saved. You've planned. And people sometimes forget to focus in on themselves and take care of themselves and do some things that you probably didn't expect to do or want to do or plan on doing. But now you've worked hard and you can do it. Annuities aren't the cure-all for anything, but they can provide that base income for you to go do that and enjoy yourself. Steve Parrish, it's been a blast. We've kind of blown through a bunch of time here, but I really do appreciate you coming on. I'm going to hold you to it, but I hope that you will come on again when a flash of lightning hits you, or else I read one of your articles and call you. I hope that you come on again. Any last words as we close this thing out?
Well, I just want to keep emphasizing that idea of a income, because something you said deals with a conversation we had just yesterday. One of them was with Wade Fowl, who's been one of your people before. And I said, because of my age, the world is one big lab where I see friends dealing with retirement. If you know what retirement income you have, and it's enough, I mean, so that you can pay for your housing and that kind of thing.
Sure.
People are incredibly adaptable. And so I know people who were captains of industry when they were working and now are running around with, a coupon to Denny's and all excited about it. But you know what, Stan? They're not unhappy. They really kind of have adapted and changed because they know what they have to work with.
Right.
And there's so much stress when you retire and you're so used to earning a paycheck and now you're not getting one. That's one of the reasons I like this whole idea of a known income, because that's the way people think in retirement is,
Right.
Don't talk about my number, just tell me what I'm getting a month. And so
Exactly.
I think that's important, is convert it into income in any way you can.
Build that income floor. Absolutely. Steve Parrish, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all the listeners and viewers for watching and listening to the #1 annuity podcast on the planet. And it just happens to be called Fun with Annuities. Thanks for listening to Fun with Annuities. Please hit the subscribe button and make sure to go to my site at theannuityman.com, where you can run your own SPIA, DIA, and QLAC quotes and see a live feed of the best MIGA fixed rates in the country, and even get indexed and income rider quotes as well. You can also sign up for my 6 annuity owner's manual books, and I'll ship them for free and under no obligation. I also encourage you to schedule a one-on-one call with me, Stan the Annuity Man, so we can have a full discussion of your specific situation. It will be the best brutally factual and truthful advice you will ever get, and that's one guarantee you should definitely take advantage of. So join me next time for the #1 annuity podcast on the planet, Fun with Annuities.